Hello my guys, welcome to my first unhaul of 2025. This is definitely not the biggest unhaul I've ever done, but it is still a substantial one because since I think the end of December, I think I did my last unhaul either in November or December, but since then I have gathered 35 books that I would like to remove from my library. Now this is pretty decent. One of my main goals this year is to reduce the amount of books that I own. I'm doing this organically and I'm doing it gradually, but I'm also making an effort to make conscious decisions about the books that I'm hauling and the amount of books that I'm reading versus the amount of books that I'm hauling and things like that. And I have unhauled 11 more books than I've hauled this year so far. So my current numbers are 24 books hauled, 25 books read, and today we're going to be talking about the 35 books that I am unhauling. My unhauls are cumulative, so you may have heard me talk about these guys in other videos. I have my Self-destructing books for 2024, which we just resolved last month. I have my Victims of Shelve It or Scrap It, and then I also have a handful of other things that I'm going to be saying goodbye to. I always get a question about what I do with my books. Depending on their condition, depends on where they go. I donate a lot of my like rattier paperbacks to my local charity shops, and for my hardbacks or just generally like books in good condition, I do sell them on Vinted. So my Vinted is always linked in my description box. Typically by the time you guys have seen an unhaul, I've already listed and sold the majority of the books in the video. I don't know whether that's going to be the case for this one specifically though, because I am going to be going away and I don't know whether I'll have had time to list them and post them before then. But I do recommend if you are in the UK, because I think for the UK Vinted you can only sell and send to the UK. So if you're in the UK, if you use Vinted, would recommend following me if you would like to be alerted when I'm uploading new stuff, because the first time you're going to find out what I'm selling is probably when you get that notification, not when you see this video. But I'm going to be going through these kind of in sections, but it's not that serious. We'll start with the self-destructing books, I guess. Last year's self-destructing book themes was sequels, so the idea was that I had a bunch of sequels in series that I was unsure if I wanted to continue. I would give these books a try, and if I still wasn't really feeling it, then I would unhaul the entire series. One of those series was whatever this series is called, actually. This is The Girl with All the Gifts, and also the prequel, which is The Boy on the Bridge. Both of these can be read as standalones, but if you do want to read both, I would recommend starting with The Girl with All the Gifts, because one of the kind of big plot twists in this book, one of the main things that you learn, is a normal part of this world from pretty early on. But these ones are zombie apocalypse stories. Really enjoyed them. I just don't feel the need to keep them. Sadly, I am unhauling the second two books and also the short story collection in the Skyward series by Brandon Sanderson. I have kept Skyward because I think that you can read it as a standalone, and I really loved the first book. But I am unhauling Starsight, which is book 2, Cytonic, which is book 3, and Skyward Flight, which is the novellas. I've read 2 of these and I DNF'd in Cytonic. I did, like I said, really love Starsight, but I felt like it was a very repetitive series and I didn't feel like we were progressing the plot or the characters as much as I would like. And also you spend a lot of time in that series focusing on the characters that I don't like the least, but you're away from the characters that I like the most. I'm also unhauling the first 3 books in the Tyrant Soul series by C.L. Wilson. So that is Lord of the Fading Lands, King of Sword and Sky, and also Lady of Light and Shadows. C.L. Wilson is an author that I met at Rare as well, so sadly I'm also going to be saying goodbye to all of these like cool signed art cards for the book covers. I did really like this series to start off with. It's like I guess kind of a hybrid between a fantasy romance and a historical romance. I feel like it has like bodice ripper energy. I don't even know how to explain that. I think it's kind of like the covers and the aesthetic goes along with those kind of historical romances for me. But I didn't really like the very stereotypical gender roles that we had in here, and that's what put me off this one. I'm also unhauling the first 2 books in the Newsflesh series by Myra Grant. I read book 1, gave it 3 stars. I didn't really like the focus of this series, and I also find the main characters to be incredibly obnoxious, and it also has a little bit of a noir tone, which I don't really enjoy, so I DNF'd Deadline at about 100 to 200 pages in. And then the last of the full series I'm unhauling, I think, yeah, I think so, is the Serpent and Dove series by Shelby Mahurin. I really liked book 1 when I read it, but I think I was more swept along with the story. I gave it 5 stars, but in hindsight, I actually remember pretty much nothing about it. And I started Blood and Honey, read almost 200 pages and kind of realized that I wasn't attached to it at all, and I was just going through the motions, and so I DNF'd. For the ones that are a victim of Shelve It or Scrap It, we have some that I've read and some that I haven't. One that I have read is The Lies I Tell by Julie Clark. This one is a thriller that I really enjoyed about a con artist and the journalist that is trying to take her down. I am unhauling this though because I generally just do unhaul thrillers. I enjoy them while I'm reading them and I enjoy the ride, but I almost always feel no need to keep them after I finish them. We also have Voyage of the Damned by Frances White. This is one that I was very hesitant about anyway. I did DNF this one early on, I think less than 50 pages in, but I knew that it was a murder mystery going into it, which is a genre or like a subgenre that I rarely ever touch. Honestly, I avoid it most of the time, but it also has a like silly, goofy, humorous writing style full of levity, which I also traditionally really dislike, and this was a quick and easy DNF for me. I do feel though, I mean, I only read the first 50 pages, but based on the complexity of the world and the writing style, I feel like if you like things like the Chorus of Dragons series by Jen Lyons, then you may actually enjoy this one. I also DNF'd To Gaze Upon Wicked Gods by Molly X. Chang. I DNF'd this one past the 100-page mark. The writing style was a little bit too over dramatic, like melodramatic for me, and while the story and the synopsis was relatively interesting, the writing style just wasn't compelling me to continue, and writing style is incredibly important to me. I also am unhauling all of the Tracy Thorn books that I have. These ones I think are all either bully romances or revenge romances, and I started The Revenge You Seek and DNF'd it. I didn't really like the writing style, and for a romance I didn't really care about the characters, and so I decided that I would be unhauling all of Tracy Lorraine's books because this is the one that had the most interesting synopsis to me and I didn't love it. Also DNFing Broken Bonds by Jay Bree, which is the first book in the Bonds That Tie series, I think. This one is Jay Bree's reverse harem or why choose romance. I do really like A Crown of Oaths and Curses by Jay Bree, which is a high fantasy fated mate story, but this is more of a contemporary fantasy why choose. I generally don't like why choose as a trope anyway, and I also didn't like the tone in this or I don't want to say the attitude of the main characters, though she has a bad attitude. It's more the tone in which the story is delivered through her viewpoint that I wasn't really vibing with. Really quick and easy read though. I also am unhauling the Goldsboro edition of A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid. I actually read this one for Shelve It or Scrap It and really enjoyed it. I feel like it could have lent a little bit more into the gothic horror vibes that it had going on instead of the fantasy and like the romance plot that it had, but I did have a really good time with it, much better than expected. I just don't need 2 copies of this. I do have a couple of Christmas romances, which are another thing that I don't really love. When I want a story like this, I tend to stray towards, you know, like really cheesy Netflix or Hallmark movies. And when it comes to books, I feel like they're just a little bit too long-winded for the amount that I want to absorb the Christmas romance vibes. These two also have exactly the same plot. And I think I enjoyed Kiss Her Once to Me by Alison Cochrane a little bit more than I enjoyed Make You Mine this Christmas. But these are both about women who start fake dating men and go home with them for the holidays it's like mutually beneficial. It serves both of their purposes. And when they arrive at this guy's house, they find out that the guy's sister is somebody that they have dated in the past, and it becomes about those two kind of reconnecting while the sister thinks that the main character is dating her brother, but actually isn't. It's a fake relationship, but they don't want to admit that. And yet they're both exactly the same. So if that's a trope that you like, or a story, it's not even a trope, it's too convoluted to be a trope, but if that's a setup that you enjoy, then you may like both of these. I know I did. Sadly, I'm unhauling 1,000 Pieces of You by Claudia Gray. This has been on my shelves for years. I wanted it when it was published, like back in 2014, and I did pick it up a couple of years afterwards, and I just haven't gotten around to it. And I am really sad because when I read it recently, I did very much enjoy it. I just know that I would have enjoyed it so much more if I'd have read it closer to when I actually bought it. It's like a fun, fast-paced YA about jumping through dimensions on the hunt of a murderer, and it was a really good time. I just don't realistically see myself pursuing the rest of the series. Probably two of the ones that I'm saddest about in this unhaul. The first one is A Tempest of Tea by Hafsa Faisal. This one is the Fairy Loot edition. I love We Hunt the Flame by Hafsa Faisal, so this was one of my most anticipated releases of last year. However, I did DNF it, I think between 100 to 200 pages in maybe. It might have been just under the 100 page mark. Even though I found We Hunt the Flame so atmospheric and I loved the writing style and the world, I just really was struggling to get invested or immersed in this one, and I did not care about any of the characters. I also sadly DNF'd Air by Sabaa Tahir. I think I made it about halfway through this one, so I read quite a bit. And first off, I didn't know that this was connected to An Ember in the Ashes when I picked it up. I actually really liked the Ember in the Ashes series, or at least the first two books. And I also didn't know that it's almost a direct sequel of that plot line. It's set like probably about 20 years past the end of An Ember in the Ashes, but I felt, considering this was actually set in a world that I was familiar with, I wasn't feeling the same vibes or the same atmosphere as I was in An Ember in the Ashes. It didn't feel connected at all, and I didn't like how connected it was to An Ember in the Ashes, especially because that wasn't something I was aware of going in, and I don't feel like that was especially broadly advertised, or maybe it was just me that missed it. And I also generally just wasn't getting invested in the story, which I did think was weird considering that I did really enjoy An Ember in the Ashes, and so I decided to give this one a miss. One that I read in its entirety that I'm unhauling, is my bookmark still in here? No, it's just a letter from the author, but that is In the Ravenous Dark by A.M. Strickland. This one is a standalone, and I think that's why I didn't like it. It was really rich and immersive in the beginning, but then considering how much world building was done and how much complexity we were building in the world, I felt like the plot really let the world building down. Like, it wasn't as complex and rich as the world, and I feel like if this was maybe a duology, I would have enjoyed it a lot more. And then for my final stack, these are more random ones that I'm unhauling for various reasons. Maybe I read them and didn't like them, decided I didn't want them, saw them on my shelf and realized that I kind of didn't want them there anymore, that kind of thing. And a couple of them I may have briefly mentioned in other videos, but the first one is Capitana by Cassandra James, which is a recent Illumicrate book that I don't want. We have Master of Sorrows by Justin T. Call. Don't worry, I do have another copy of this. I have a paperback, and I also have this. So this one is the US hardback. I got it secondhand, so it's got like stains on it, which is fine because it's just like splashes of coffee stains or something. It's not a big deal, but it's a US hardback, so it's not even readable. Like, I could not read this. It's so heavy. And also, you know what's underrated? A paperback. Because I get so many hardbacks through things like subscription boxes now, or maybe sometimes I'll buy a special edition set of a series that I really love. I am so open to, when I purchase books just of my own volition that I want to read, that I'm interested in, I am so open to purchasing those in paperback. So I've decided that I will keep my paperback copy, which was actually gifted to me, and I will be unhauling this very heavy US hardback. You could hurt somebody with this. I'm not even joking. It's really dense. I think during an episode of Shelf or Scrap It, I saw this on my shelves and I decided I didn't want it anymore, and that is Layla by Colleen Hoover. There are some books by Colleen Hoover that I love and some that I enjoy less, and this I think is one of my least favorites. I hated the plot twist in this. I do find Colleen Hoover generally very entertaining, and this was kind of entertaining, but also I feel like it took some weird turns that I did not enjoy. I got this one from Locked Library. It's Blood of Hercules by Jasmine Mars, and this is a hyped romantasy type story that I'd heard a lot about. Obviously the marketing push was quite big for this one, so it's one that I was interested in, and because it was coming in a sub box that I am subscribed to, I was like, okay, cool, I won't skip this month, I'll get it. And then a bunch of people told me that the rest of this series is going into like Why Choose or Reverse Harem, which, like I said, is not a trope that I enjoy, and it's not really, for me, I don't feel like it's worth getting invested in a series that has that trope, because I don't enjoy that trope. And I say this all the time, it's not that I'm offended by the trope or anything. I was about to say I've never read a book with the Why Choose trope that I've enjoyed. However, I have very recently just read Bonded by Thorns by Elizabeth Helen, the first book in the Beasts of Brio series, and I did enjoy that book. However, in book one, the reverse harem or why choose trope is not in full swing, and I do think that when I get further into that series, or if I do choose to go further into that series, I would enjoy it less as that becomes more present and more dominant. It's the kind of the same with this. I don't really want to be going into series where I think there's a big chance that later down the line I'm not really going to be enjoying them, because what's the point? I also have The Queens of Minutes Later by Tessa Gratton. I gave this book 3 stars. I did enjoy it, but I went into it with the wrong expectations. I think I expected it to build up to some kind of like epic moment, and it didn't. It's a King Lear retelling, and all of the drama and all of the events in here are more like betrayal and backstabbing opposed to like epic monumental moments, and I felt like I was very disappointed because I was expecting this book to build to something that it never did. And I do have the companion novel to this, which is Lady Hotspur, which I'm going into with lower expectations, and hopefully I'll enjoy that one a little bit more. I did still like this one. I love the writing style. My feelings on it are too complicated for it to take up so much space on my shelf. I also have Trickery by Jamie and Eve and Jane Washington, which is one that once again has the why choose trope. I was collecting a bunch of romance a couple of years ago to try all different types when I started really getting into the genre, and since I've discovered that I don't love why choose, I have unhauled them all, and this is one that was kind of left behind that I didn't know had that trope until one of my lovely viewers let me know. And then the last 2 I have are from a PR package that I received recently from Source Books to celebrate the launch of the UK branches of their TikTok and Instagram account. So they sent me a box of fan favorites, 2 of which I already own. One I've read and one I have not. So I'm going to be passing these copies along. I'm not going to be keeping them. The first one is A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair. This is the one that I own and have read, and I have really enjoyed it. It is a fantasy romance Hades and Persephone retelling. And then the other one that I own and I have not read is Hooked by Emily McIntyre. This one is I think it's a dark Peter Pan romance retelling, obviously featuring Hook, but because I haven't read this one, I don't know whether it's like contemporary or high fantasy or what the deal is, but it is one, like, I've heard pretty good things about Emily McIntyre, so I definitely want to give her books a try. So those are the 35 books that I'm going to be unhauling this time around. I was going to wait a little bit actually before I did this. I was going to schedule my unhaul for like a little bit later in the year, but the stacks of books that I had in the corner of the room, which is like where I keep them before I film this video, were threatening to topple. Like, it was a bit of a struggle and I definitely needed a clear out, and spring is definitely, I think, in my opinion, a great time to be doing that. So we pulled it forward a little bit. I do foresee me posting unhauls maybe a little bit more regularly than I anticipated. I originally thought that I'd do maybe 2 in a year, but I think we may definitely have 3 because I'm pretty sure that I have 6 books that I'm about to unhaul in the coming month or so that I need to hang on to for a little bit longer for the purposes of filming videos. And I don't foresee it just being 6 as well. I feel like there's going to be a couple more in there on top of all of the ones that we typically generate from things like Shelve It or Scrap It, or just me like organically reading and unhauling books as I go. So let me know, well, I always say let me know down in the comments if you enjoyed any of these. Don't do that because I'm obviously unhauling them, but maybe you guys would like to let me know that you were here and you don't feel like you have anything to say. You could leave me a clock emoji for Hooked by Emily McIntyre. But aside from that, guys, please don't forget to like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you wanna. If you head to my description box, you will find a link to my Vinted if you want to snag any of these books for yourself. You will also find a link to my Goodreads, my Instagram, and my Patreon if you would like to join me on any of those. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you will go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.